I want you to imagine something for a second. Just picture inheriting this massive, incredibly wealthy empire.
Right.
You are just 24 years old.
Yeah.
You have the crown, you have unimaginable riches, and on paper, you possess absolute power.
Which sounds great, right?
Exactly. It sounds like the ultimate dream. But almost the second you sit on that throne, you realize something terrifying.
That the ground is falling out from under you?
Yes, because your own family, your top military commander, and of all things, a foreign multinational corporation, are all secretly plotting to destroy you.
It really is the ultimate nightmare scenario for any leader. I mean, you are at the absolute pinnacle of power, but the structural foundation beneath you is, well, it's completely hollow.
Welcome to a new deep dive. Today we are immersing ourselves in the historical and biographical accounts of the life, the brief reign, and the deeply tragic death of Nawab Siraj ud-Daulah of Bengal.
And we're going to be exploring the infamous Battle of Plassey in 1757.
Right, a conflict that didn't just change a regime, but, fundamentally rewired the global economic order.
Our focus here is really to unpack the mechanics behind this turning point. We're looking at how a sovereign ruler was undermined.
Undermined from the inside.
Exactly. Not necessarily by superior military tactics, but by a carefully orchestrated corporate buyout of his inner circle.
And, maybe even more compellingly, our mission today is to explore the chilling fates that awaited every single person who conspired against this young ruler.
It's quite a list.
It is. It's this dense, incredibly dramatic narrative about wealth, treason, and the systemic consequences of betrayal.
Yeah.
So let's establish who we are talking about and the world he operated in. Siraj ud-Daulah was born Mirza Muhammad around 1732.
And to understand his position, we really have to look at the geopolitical setup of India at the time.
Set the stage for us.
So the Grand Mughal Empire was fading, right? It was decentralizing its power. Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa were governed by a Nawab.
Which is like a semi-autonomous ruler.
Basically, yeah. He still technically pledged allegiance to the Mughal emperor, but practically he operated as an independent sovereign.
And Bengal wasn't just some random province.
Oh, not at all. It was an absolute economic powerhouse. I mean, it accounted for a massive percentage of global GDP through its textiles, its silk, and agricultural output.
The wealth generation happening there during the mid-18th century is honestly hard to overstate. It was the industrial and trading hub of the subcontinent.
Truly. Now, Siraj's grandfather, Nawab Alivardi Khan, had ruled this prosperous region with an iron grip. But he had a structural succession issue.
He had 3 daughters, right, but no sons.
Exactly. So Siraj, who is the son of his youngest daughter, Amina Begum, comes into the picture.
And our sources make it very clear that Siraj quickly became the absolute apple of his grandfather's eye.
He really did. Alivardi Khan practically raised him to rule.
He kept him close, grooming him as his representative. But we also see from the historical accounts that Siraj had this notoriously impulsive streak.
Yeah, that's putting it mildly.
Right. There's this wild early incident where, while his grandfather's still alive, Siraj secretly takes some loyal followers, leaves the capital of Murshidabad, and actually attacks Patna.
Which is crazy when you think about it.
Because Patna was governed by his own grandfather's representative.
Exactly. He launches this assault without permission, which in any traditional court is tantamount to a massive rebellion.
It's treason, basically.
Under normal circumstances, an act like that would result in imprisonment or much worse. It directly challenges the central authority.
But his grandfather's reaction is so telling.
Yeah, when Alivardi Khan discovers what his grandson has done, he rushes to Patna, de-escalates the situation entirely, and completely forgives Siraj.
And not just forgives him, but subsequently declares him his official heir.
Right, which sends a huge message to everyone else in the court.
So fast forward to April 1756. Alivardi Khan passes away, and Siraj, at around 24 years old, ascends the throne.
Which is an incredibly young age for that level of power.
Okay, let's unpack this. You are basically handing a 24-year-old the keys to the most profitable mega corporation in the world.
Yep.
And he is surrounded by bitter, passed-over executives who have literally been waiting in the wings for decades.
It's a recipe for disaster.
I read this and immediately wondered, was Siraj actually ready for the political maneuvering this required? Or did his grandfather's intense favoritism just paint a massive target on his back.
The favoritism undoubtedly isolated him. I mean, to understand the immediate crisis Siraj faced, we have to look at those internal family factions.
A tension was completely built into the succession.
Absolutely. Siraj's eldest aunt, Ghaseti Begum, vehemently opposed his ascension. She was this highly ambitious political player who desperately wanted her own adopted son on the throne.
And she had resources.
Oh, she had amassed immense personal wealth and influence. She was operating out of her heavily fortified palace, which was famously known as Motijheel.
So she's sitting on a fortune, operating almost as a shadow government and actively plotting against it.
Right.
Siraj knows this, so his very first major move as the new Nawab is to march his forces right up to Motijheel, seize the palace, take control of that immense wealth, and effectively imprison his aunt.
Which is a massive power play. By seizing his aunt's wealth, Siraj was asserting undisputed dominance.
It's a very clear message.
It was a message that there would be no dual power structures in his Bengal. However, executing that move with such blunt force created a huge domestic power vacuum.
He alienated everyone.
Exactly. He didn't just isolate his family. He signaled to every other political player in the region that their assets could be seized at any moment.
It's like a new CEO firing the entire board of directors on day one.
That's a great way to put it.
I mean, it absolutely establishes who is in charge, but it practically guarantees that those ousted directors will immediately start funding a proxy war.
And sitting right on the border, just waiting for exactly this kind of internal fracture, is a foreign multinational corporation with its own private army.
The British East India Company.
Right. And it's crucial to understand that the East India Company at this time was not just a trading firm dealing in spices and textiles.
No, they were heavily armed.
It was a militarized corporate entity. They had shareholders in London, yes, but they also possessed heavily armed forts, naval vessels, and a standing army right there in the subcontinent.
And the domestic rivals in Bengal start looking at this heavily armed corporation and realize, hey, we share a common obstacle here.
The new 24-year-old Nawab.
Exactly. So the sources detail this sprawling conspiracy forming. You have Mir Jafar, the disgruntled top military commander.
Who had served under Siraj's grandfather and had really been hoping to secure the throne for himself.
Right. Then you have Jagat Seth, who is a wildly influential billionaire banker. He's basically the primary financier of the state.
And you have political insiders like Rajmahal.
And then, of course, you have the East India Company, represented largely by Robert Clive.
The inciting incident that actually fuses these domestic malcontents with the British forces revolves around embezzlement.
This is where it kicks off.
Right. So Krishna Balab, who is the son of the conspirator Raj Balab, embezzles massive state funds from the royal treasury.
Just steals from the state.
Yeah. And knowing Siraj will execute him for it, he flees to seek asylum with the British at Fort William in Calcutta.
Siraj rightfully demands they hand over the fugitive and the stolen state funds.
Which makes sense.
But the British flat out refuse. So Siraj marches his army on Calcutta in June 1756 and attacks the fort, successfully taking it.
He captures it.
Now, traditional British framings of this event often paint Siraj as an erratic, hot-headed kid throwing a tantrum. But looking at the biographical accounts and the legal context, I really push back on that narrative.
It's a very biased framing.
Right. Wasn't he legitimately defending his sovereignty against blatant corporate overreach? I mean, the East India Company was operating on his land under his trade agreements, and they were harboring a criminal who stole from the state treasury.
Framing him as a hot-headed youth absolutely obscures the actual legal reality of the conflict. This was a profound clash between a sovereign ruler attempting to enforce the laws of his land and an expanding colonial enterprise.
An enterprise that just increasingly believed it was completely exempt from those laws.
Exactly. The British refusal to hand over a known criminal was a direct public challenge to the Nawab's authority. If Siraj allowed a foreign corporation to grant immunity to a state embezzler, his legitimacy as a ruler would evaporate overnight.
He had to act to preserve the integrity of the state.
He really had no choice.
But his attack on Calcutta sends shockwaves through the British establishment. The East India Company realizes they simply cannot control Siraj.
He's a problem for them.
He is too independent and far too protective of his sovereignty for their trading operations to expand the way they want.
And the company's leadership recognized that military conquest alone would be incredibly costly and risky. I mean, Siraj's army was massive.
Huge. So Robert Clive utilizes a strategy of corporate capture.
Yes. He strikes a secret, formalized agreement to buy off Mir Jafar, the Nawab's top military commander.
The terms were explicit, right?
Very explicit. Mir Jafar would betray his ruler on the battlefield, and in exchange, the British would install him as the new compliant Nawab of Bengal.
Wow.
And the company would receive unprecedented tax exemptions and territorial rights.
It's a literal hostile corporate takeover of an entire country, engineered through middle management.
That's exactly what it was.
And this corporate political conspiracy culminates a year later, on June 23, 1757, at the Battle of Plassey.
The infamous battle.
Right. And what is so striking about Plassey is that it didn't change global history through brilliant military strategy or superior technology. It changed history through a bought-out army.
The mechanics of the battle are fascinating when you look at how military loyalty functioned at the time. Siraj fielded a massive force that vastly outnumbered the British troops.
He had the numbers.
Oh, easily. But the army was fundamentally compromised from within.
Now, Siraj did have some loyal commanders. Men like Mir Jafar and Mohanlal threw their divisions into the fight fiercely.
Yeah, Mir Jafar actually leads a devastating cavalry charge, but is ultimately killed in an artillery exchange.
But then you look at the bulk of the Nawab's army. The vast majority of the troops were under the command of Mir Jafar, Lutuf Khan, and Raidurlov.
The conspirators.
And the sources describe them literally standing idle like statues. They just watched the battle happen.
It's a surreal image.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me, looking at the logistics of this betrayal. How does an army of tens of thousands of men just sit out a battle?
It's a great question.
Didn't the ordinary soldiers holding the weapons realize they were being sold out by their bosses?
Well, that brings us to the structure of 18th century mercenary armies in the subcontinent. These soldiers were not fighting for a modern nation-state with a unified national identity.
Okay.
They were largely mercenaries or retainers. Their direct loyalty, and more importantly, their paychecks, were tied entirely to their immediate commanders.
So the Central State Treasury didn't pay the frontline infantrymen directly.
Exactly. Mir Jafar paid him. So if Mir Jafar orders his division to hold the line and not engage, the soldiers just obey their paymaster.
Wow. So the betrayal paralyzed the entire military apparatus from the top down?
Entirely.
And amidst this absolute chaos, with his loyal commander dead and two-thirds of his army refusing to move, Siraj makes a fatal, heartbreaking error.
Unaware of the sheer depth of the treason, he turns to the very man who sold him out.
He asks Mir Jafar for advice on what to do next.
Because he was turning to the most senior military mind in his camp, a man who had served his grandfather for decades.
It makes sense in his mind.
Right. So Mir Jafar advises the young Nawab to halt the battle for the day. He suggests pulling the loyal troops back to rest, promising they will regroup and fight the next morning.
And the second Siraj orders his loyal, exhausted troops to stand down, the British launch a massive coordinated assault on the retreating lines.
The resting army is routed, the camp falls into chaos, and the battle is lost.
Siraj finally realizes the scale of the treason and flees the battlefield back to his capital, Murshidabad.
But he knows the capital is lost at this point.
Yeah. He disguises himself and attempts to escape toward Patna by boat with his wife, Lutfunisa, and a few loyal followers, hoping to rally French allies to mount a resistance.
But the escape attempt fails due to this incredibly minute detail from his past.
But this part is wild.
They stop near Rajmahal to rest and get food. And Siraj is recognized not by a British spy or a rival soldier, but by a local ascetic, a fakir named Dana Shah.
The biographical sources note that Siraj, during his impulsive earlier years, had severely punished this exact man.
Yes.
It's the kind of historical detail that feels almost fictional, but it's entirely documented. The man he once wronged is the very man who spots him in disguise and tips off the new regime's men.
Talk about bad luck.
Just 8 days after the Battle of Plassey, the 24-year-old Nawab is captured.
And with his capture, the newly installed puppet regime had to immediately tie up loose ends.
Because a living, legitimate ruler, even imprisoned, serves as a constant rallying point for rebellion.
Exactly. You can't have him sitting in a cell while you sit on a stolen throne.
So Siraj is brought back to Murshidabad in chains. He is presented before Mir Jafar in the very palace he used to rule.
Right.
Interestingly, Mir Jafar himself doesn't give the explicit execution order. He remains conspicuously silent.
It's Mir Jafar's son, a 17-year-old named Miran, who takes charge and orders the young Nawab's death.
Why the silence from Mir Jafar?
Well, Mir Jafar's silence was a political necessity. It afforded him this thin veneer of deniability while his son executed the inevitable requirement of the coup.
The details of the assassination are remarkably grim. The man chosen to be the assassin is someone named Mohammadi Beg.
Yeah.
What makes this so dark is that Mohammadi Beg was an orphan whom Siraj's own family had taken in and raised.
They fed him, sheltered him, and now he is holding the blade.
Our sources state that when the assassin approached, the 25-year-old Siraj asked for one final basic human comfort: a drink of water.
And he was denied.
Completely denied. He was brutally hacked to death right there in the cell.
And as if the murder wasn't enough to secure their power, the new regime needed to utilize public terror to crush any lingering loyalty to the old administration.
What did they do?
They placed his mutilated body on the back of an elephant and paraded it through the crowded streets of Murshidabad.
Good Lord.
It was a visceral demonstration that the regime change was final and completely irreversible.
The historical irony of this moment is staggering. Mir Jafar got exactly what he negotiated for. He received the crown and access to the treasury.
But at what cost?
Exactly. His legacy in the region was permanently ruined.
Mm.
To this very day, in the history books and in cultural memory, his name is synonymous with treason.
Very much so.
His sprawling palace in Murshidabad is quite literally known as Namak Haram Diorhi, which translates to Traitor's Gate.
Mm.
He sold out his sovereign for a crown he barely got to wear, and that single assassination effectively triggered 2 centuries of British colonial rule in India.
It illustrates the devastating macro effects of localized greed. A few insiders chose personal enrichment over the sovereignty of their state, and that fundamentally altered the trajectory of global wealth distribution for the next 200 years.
It is a massive historical turning point.
Okay.
But I want to dive into the aftermath for the conspirators.
Yeah.
Because on paper, they won, right?
Yeah, they got what they wanted.
The British got their puppet government, and the traitors got their money and power. Yet, looking at the sources, history has a very strange way of balancing the scales.
Oh, absolutely.
The biographical accounts reveal a shocking aftermath for the victors. I want to look systemically at what happened to these people, because none of them seem to get a happy ending.
The historical karmic justice that fell upon the conspirators of Plassey is genuinely chilling, and as you mentioned, deeply rooted in the unstable systems they created. Let's start with Miran, the 17-year-old who ordered Siraj's brutal execution. Miran's cruelty just escalated. To secure his future, he later ordered the execution of Siraj's surviving aunts, including Ghaseti Begum, who had originally opposed Siraj, and Amina Begum, Siraj's mother.
He went after the ants, too.
Yeah. Miran had them put on a boat, taken out into the middle of the river, and ordered the bottom of the boat to be broken so they would drown.
That is horrific.
The accounts state that as the boat was sinking, Amina Begum screamed out a curse, praying that the man who betrayed and murdered her family would be struck down by lightning.
Wait.
And the historical record documents that not long after, while out on a military campaign, Miran was resting in his tent during a severe thunderstorm.
No way.
A bolt of lightning struck the tent and killed him instantly.
The historical irony of a lightning bolt striking him down after that curse is the kind of detail that just forces you to pause when reading the sources.
It is a bizarre historical fact.
What about the others?
Well, next we have Jagat Seth, the billionaire banker who financed the betrayal. A few years later, a subsequent Nawab named Mir Qasim recognized a structural threat.
He realized Jagat Seth was too powerful.
Exactly. Jagat Seth had proven he could buy and sell kings. That made him inherently too dangerous for any new ruler to keep around. So Mir Qasim had the banker stuffed into a sack and thrown from the ramparts of a fort into the river below.
From making kings to being tossed into a river in a sack.
Yeah. Then there were the intermediaries who brokered the deal. Umashand, a wealthy merchant, was actually tricked by Robert Clive.
Wait, Clive double-crossed him?
Oh, big time. Clive had a fake treaty drawn up on red paper to convince Umashand he was going to get a massive percentage of the state treasury for his role in the treason. After the battle, Clive revealed the treaty was a forgery and Umashand was getting nothing.
Wow.
The sheer shock of being cheated by the very corporation he helped install completely broke Umachand's mind. He lost his sanity and died in a state of madness.
And there's Nanda Kumar, right?
Yes. Another insider, Nanda Kumar, who heavily colluded with the British, eventually fell out of favor as the East India Company consolidated its legal power. He holds the grim distinction of being the first Indian to be hanged by the British under their newly imposed legal system.
I want to dig into Robert Clive's fate next, because the sources present a really fascinating contradiction here.
Yeah, his story is complex.
He was the architect of the Buyout,
Yeah.
He supposedly, quote-unquote, won the empire and became unimaginably wealthy.
Yeah.
But looking at the parliamentary records, his prize actually destroyed him.
It really did.
He goes back to England, and the sheer scale of the wealth he siphoned out of Bengal completely disrupted the British social order.
That is a vital systemic point. Clive returned as a nabob, which is a term the British used mockingly for company men who returned with immense, newly acquired wealth.
Like new money.
Exactly. His new fortune threatened the traditional aristocratic landowning class in Parliament. They despised him.
So they went after him.
They subjected him to massive, grueling corruption investigations, dragging his reputation through the mud. The intense public scrutiny, combined with chronic illness and a severe opium addiction, drove him into a deep depression.
And he ultimately died by suicide in his London home.
Right. Even the man who executed the corporate takeover couldn't survive the political fallout it generated back home.
What about the puppet rulers themselves?
Let's look at Mir Qasim, the man who eventually replaced Mir Jafar when the British tired of his inefficiency. Mir Qasim actually understood macroeconomics.
He tried to fix things.
He did. He realized the East India Company's aggressive tax exemptions were systematically bankrupting the local Bengali economy and destroying local merchants. He tried to reform the system, which led to an all-out war with the company.
And he lost.
He lost at the Battle of Buxar, was forced to flee, and died in extreme poverty in Delhi. The sources note the horrific detail that his children were murdered.
It's tragedy after tragedy.
Okay.
And finally, that leaves the original traitor, Mir Jafar.
The man who started it all.
He got his throne, but he spent his reign as a humiliated puppet. Robert Clive openly mocked him, referring to him in official letters as the old fool.
Yeah, no respect at all.
And the East India Company's endless financial demands completely bankrupted his treasury to the point where he had to sell off the palace's gold and silver vessels just to make payments.
He was entirely stripped of his dignity and his wealth. He spent his final days suffering from a slow, agonizing case of leprosy, dying in 1765.
What a miserable end.
He died knowing he was despised by his own people, ridiculed by his corporate masters, and remembered purely for his betrayal.
The ultimate poison chalice. The story of Nawab Siraj ud-Daulah is so much more than just a biographical account of a young ruler cut down in his prime.
It really is a profound blueprint for how states can be captured.
The victors of Plassey undeniably won the battle that day. But as we've seen, because their power was built entirely on a foundation of deceit and corporate extraction, those unstable fractures eventually swallowed every single one of them.
It perfectly illustrates how systems built purely on internal sabotage and unchecked greed just cannot sustain themselves. They dismantled a sovereign state for personal gain, and the resulting chaos consumed their own lives.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We've explored the mechanics of a historical corporate takeover and the incredibly heavy consequences of betrayal.
Yeah.
But I want to leave you with this final thought to mull over.
It's a good one.
If a massive, wealthy empire could be entirely toppled, not by an invading army with superior weapons, but simply by a foreign company buying the loyalty of a few passed-over executives and disgruntled insiders, it makes you wonder.
It really does.
How many major shifts in our world today, right now, are being decided not by grand public mandate or complex strategy, but by petty workplace grievances, internal rivalries, and the simple, quiet price of a bribe?
It's a structural vulnerability that makes 18th century history feel incredibly relevant to modern institutions.
Until next time, keep diving deep.